There are no real events, at least none of the major ones that happen in a vacuum in Red Dead Redemption 2. Arthur's sickness doesn't just mark the beginning of his physical decline, it mirrors the collapse of the Vanderlyn gang itself, and that collapse runs parallel to something else happening oh so subtly, yet equally as significant: Dutch's inability to keep his darker instincts in check. As the game continues, pressure mounts everywhere at once, and as we move from the chapter of Shady Belle through Guarma and entering Beaver Hollow, the plight of the Wapitis become even more significant. They're being pushed off land that was promised to them. Cornwall's expansion begins to turn aggressive in the pursuit of bigger profits and a desire to secure oil that was apparently found underneath Wapiti lands. And the younger members of the tribe grow angrier as their elders' agreements were ignored. Their warnings, pleas, and attempt to meet some kind of middle ground through a civilized yet bureaucratic system is falling apart. And all of that converges at the same moment Dutch's willingness to use everyone, becomes not just apparent but central to how the gang operates by the time they reach Beaver Hollow. Now, we'll unpack those events in time, but today isn't about cataloging everything that went wrong. Today's about continuing to identify patterns, because quite some time before the gang really fractures, something central to the gang, Dutch's core philosophy, begins to change. The definition, or rather Dutch's definition of loyalty, and how aggressively he enforces that. What once meant protecting the group, honoring their code, and surviving together slowly mutates into a smaller and more personal meaning. Staying loyal no longer means doing what's right for the gang, it means staying with him. And Dutch starts drawing a line in the sand. He won't be captured, and anyone who stands beside him, so long as they don't question him, won't be captured either. And his mind, being one step ahead of the law, only works if there are no dissenters, no doubts, and certainly no one raising any flags he doesn't want to see. And that's where Arthur comes in, because Arthur never stops being loyal to the idea of the gang. What changes is that Dutch begins mistaking genuine concern for disobedience, a change John would become a casualty of. It was thanks to his fears as a father of escaping this life and committing fully to the right ideas and execution in securing a better life for himself, Abigail, and Jack, that his own personal doubts and fears bleed into questioning Dutch's ability, the success rate, and the proof that this would be a good job to commit to. It was precisely those fears, genuine as they were, that began to feel like betrayal. And so, Dutch, seeing an opportunity within the Saint Denis Bank to let John get captured, allowed him to do so. It was his own betrayal through a lack of action, fueled by a growing sense of viewing warnings as betrayals, questions as threats, and loyalty to what was originally the gang's philosophy is now seen as suspicious under Dutch's new authority. This isn't just about supposedly Arthur abandoning Dutch, it's how Arthur's loyalty, rooted in the gang's original ideals, slowly pushes him out of Dutch's head, who had made it clear, through previous slips of the tongue, he's really only concerned about himself.
We ain't even played our hand yet. We just need to put some more money in our pockets. Make our escape. Broke, alone, they're gonna pick us off one by one. And you know it, maybe.
To really crack down on the pattern of Dutch's shift, I don't want to lean on the usual framing of right when Hosea died, everything fell apart. That's the most common way people track Dutch's decline because it's clean and it is somewhat linear. But what I'm more interested in is what was happening around the gang, how the pressure kept stacking, how the law kept tightening, and how Dutch was trying to stay one step ahead while still chasing the one thing he kept promising would save them: the plan, the money, the escape. Because it's the core engine driving everything forward. Dutch has to keep everyone moving, keep everyone believing, while still holding on to this image of himself as the man who cares. The man who's doing it all for them. And the thing is, that image doesn't shatter all at once, but rather cracks, and it does so in three very specific ways at three crucial moments. So let's first begin with language. Even as early as Horseshoe Overlook, you can catch it in the way Dutch speaks. These little flashes of suspicion, even comments that suggest he's already entertaining the idea that Arthur might betray him one day. And what makes that interesting isn't just the paranoia itself, it's what it implies about Dutch. Almost like part of him already knows he's starting to lose his grip, like he can feel his own thinking getting messier, his own control slipping, and instead of addressing that, he starts scanning the people closest to him for a reason why. And then there's a cutscene here that does two things at once. It puts a selfish kind of thinking directly in front of us, clear as day, but it also shows how Dutch reacts the moment he realizes that he said too much, how he corrects himself, how he recovers, and how he tries to patch the image back together before anyone can really question it.
You're gonna be okay. I know. Oh, I always know. Whenever I got you two by my side, things are gonna be just fine.
We are gonna be okay. By the time the gang is forced south into the state of Lemoyne, they're exhausted, pushed off the main road and tucked away into a secluded stretch of land known as Clemens Point. This is about as close to breathing room as they've had in weeks, and almost immediately things start going their way. Not far from camp, they make contact with the local sheriff in Rhodes. Through false names and a clean act, they manage to deceive him completely. So much so that they build a friendly relationship by helping captured escaped criminals. In return, the sheriff establishes a friendly enough relationship with them and even allows them to secure the release of Josiah Trelawney. It's a clean win, one that reinforces Dutch's already low opinion of the people down here. Easy to fool and easier to manipulate. Then comes the next hook. Rumors of Confederate gold, buried somewhere in the middle of a feud between two powerful families. The region is split, the families are backwards, the gang themselves are very unknown. On paper, it's dangerous, but to Dutch it looks like opportunity, especially when Trelawney starts talking about super agents and the very real risk of people talking in such a small town. Lemoyne, especially Rhodes, isn't safe. But that's not the angle Dutch takes. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Rhodes feels like the light at the end of an otherwise dark tunnel to him. Quite a significant moment because just before this, everything was closing in. Valentine erupted into a massive shootout after Leviticus Cornwall tracked Dutch and Strauss into town. Days before that, the Pinkertons had boldly approached Arthur while he was alone with Jack, not too far from their camp in Horseshoe Overlook. All indicators showed that they had been found, and it was only a matter of time until a significant law enforcement presence would crack down on the camp itself. Most likely, given the events of Valentine in such a short amount of time, they wouldn't be negotiating for prisoners. So here, despite being in a part of the country Dutch openly despises, despite being surrounded by unknowns, he feels like he can finally be confident again. Confident enough that he, Hosea, and Arthur go out fishing together, a moment of reprieve and a small celebration, a rare moment where Dutch lets his guard down, maybe a little too much. On its own, this moment doesn't feel especially dramatic, but it does reveal something crucial, a narrowing way of thinking. Me instead of we. A single line, but an underlying train of thought that's starting to move to the forefront. And that change doesn't stop here, it carries forward, and it transitions through irritation, the second of the three indicators. During the Mission Country pursuits on the way to speak with Thomas about securing a boat to reach Bronte's house, the conversation between Arthur and Dutch drifts away from the assault itself and toward their fundamental situation. Arthur starts questioning whether this plan actually improves their odds of hitting the bank job, and if that in turn is going to result in it actually being a successful payday. Whether if removing Bronte helps them escape at all. Whether if Tahiti itself is real, how the money in this entire equation works, how they're supposed to secure passage, and whether, given everything that's already happened, this is really the best direction they could be moving in. These aren't challenges, they're practical concerns yet again, based on how things have gone so far, based on the pressure they're under and the reality of everything they're facing. But Dutch doesn't hear him that way. Instead, he reacts with agitation. He starts framing Arthur's questions as something else completely different, comparing him to John, suggesting doubt is contagious, implying that success depends on everyone staying in line, staying together, and then he escalates it. He tells Arthur that if he wants the family broken up, if he wants everyone to go their separate ways, he should just say it now. And in this entire conversation, this is my favorite line here.
Is this Tahiti plan really gonna work out?
You tell me, Arthur. Is it? Have some goddamn faith! I am bending over backwards to make a future for us!
It brings everything back to how personal this has become for him. In Dutch's mind, he's bending over backwards to secure a future for them, and no one seems willing or able to acknowledge that. John at this point is already being mentally isolated. Within the same conversation, Dutch would go on to say that, from his perspective, Abigail is poisoning him against him, and hence against the gang. Dutch has already taken the step of writing them two off as a liability. But when Dutch tells Arthur he's starting to think like John, that line does more than just shut down the conversation. It quietly places Arthur within that same category. And given that we know what happens to John, with John being allowed to get captured during the Saint Denis bank robbery, left behind, written off in a way that pretty much all but guarantees his death, and eventually Arthur is permitted to face that same fate at the oil refinery during Beaver Hollow, they're the same method of Dutch's in action. a refusal to intervene, his choice to let circumstances deciding both of their fates instead of him outright taking initiative. And that points to a more complicated side of Dutch that I don't fully want to unpack here, but it's important to at least acknowledge this. Identifying someone as a problem, as an obstacle, or as a dissenter is not the same thing as immediately wanting them dead. And even up until the oil refinery, where Dutch clearly walks away from Arthur, there's still an element within Dutch's psyche that still has a need to preserve that self-image that he values so highly. Placing that blame on Abigail also serves another purpose for Dutch. It gives him a way to justify leaving John behind without ever having to accept responsibility himself or placing it on John. In his head, it isn't even John's fault, and it certainly wasn't Dutch's. It's Abigail. She's the influence, she's the poison, she's the reason John has to be cut loose. And that feeds directly into the way Dutch starts thinking and talking about the gang as an extension of himself. The idea of maggots in the apple, as he puts it in Guarma. People who threaten the whole by questioning the core. Once that line of thinking sets in, loyalty stops being about action and starts becoming about alignment, about pure, unadulterated belief. Now, I want to bypass Guarma for a moment, because while it's often cited as the definitive split between Arthur and Dutch, which I think is 100% true. It's where Arthur stops making excuses, quits rationalizing Dutch's behavior, and stops explaining things away to other people, and he begins confirming what even Sadie says. This isn't really who Dutch is. And out of all people, Arthur's the one that starts to be more confrontational about it, calling out his actions he sees as cruel, unnecessary, and completely unlike the man Dutch claims he is. But even if you bypass that for a moment and you head straight into the mission that's Murfree country, the idea of with me is no longer implied. It feels like it's doubled down on. At the same time, Dutch presents himself as a man fully committed to playing his hand, winning the game of chess, and that matters because it's a signal of his real change in priority. This is no longer about getting the money and getting out. It's completely about Cornwall, the Pinkertons, beating them and proving something not only to himself but everyone else around him that continues to undermine his plans and beat him down. Of course, Dutch wraps this all up in something that does very much sound reasonable. He says he just wants to see where Cornwall is, what his plans are, whether he knows that they're going to be hiding out in Beaver Hollow. That was his plan, that was his intention, and because Arthur said all the wrong things right here, unable to face the reality of the situation or the ugly truth behind his own actions, and the person that would most likely hold him accountable is holding that mirror directly up into his face, he snaps, and he sends Arthur and Charles out to clear the next hideout. And when you play this mission, Charles is the one to enlighten Arthur on Murfree country and everything that's been happening around that area. It sounds like an intelligent plan considering Charles supports Dutch's notion as to why they need to be heading there. Because of the horrifying reputation the Murfree brood have, not even law enforcement would willingly venture into that part of the wilderness. It's supremely dangerous, but it takes Charles to tell Arthur just how dangerous it is. An entire stagecoach recently disappeared without a trace. People venture into these woods and are never heard of again. Am I saying Dutch intentionally sent them out there hoping they'd get killed? No, that's not what this is. What I'm saying is that Arthur failed a test, one Dutch handed to him without ever spelling it out. And because of that, Arthur isn't the one Dutch chooses to keep close. He isn't the one brought along for the supposed reconnaissance that now he and Micah are going to have. His role was handed to Micah. So, what was the test? Well, let's play the cutscene and see if you can spot it.
You okay there?
Working it all out. Once and for all, Arthur.
What now?
We're back, and I'm sitting here, and I am contemplating the great journey of the sun and considering a famous chess move. Those oily enactors of a mediocre justice, the Pinkertons, and their benefactor, the depressing millionaire Leviticus Cornwall, they want us, Arthur. They want us. And they are going to have us.
Maybe they ain't the problem.
Meaning?
I don't know, it's just, well, I can't help but feel we would have been better running off someplace else.
But the game ain't over, Arthur. I mean, I ain't played my final move, but...
Guess I'm more interested in surviving than winning a chess.
And maybe life ain't such a thing to cling on to so tightly.
No doubt. What's our move here?
You sound like Hosea. I miss him.
I asked you a question.
What do you think?
We can't stay here. That much is obvious. Where are we gonna run to? I mean, they chased us from the west. chased us over the mountains, they ran us into the sea.
Arthur, do you have my back?
Always, Dutch. But there's more than your back to worry about. We need more money. We've been on the run for months now, and I seen you killing folk in cold blood like you always told me not to. And I'm sorry, but I can't help but think that if we
There is country in Roanoke Ridge past Butcher Creek I believe we could hold.
Okay.
You and Charles, you could take folks up that way. Micah and I need to do some reconnaissance. I ain't got a final plan yet. Arthur, I ain't got it. I just need time. I need time and no traitors.
For someone that's beginning to believe that the gang is he and he is the gang, by Arthur saying he doesn't have his back, that there's more to worry about, he's missing the core of what Dutch asked him. Are you willing to stop asking questions and just listen? And just come with me? Instead of handing a favorable answer of saying yes, unmistakably, Arthur goes on, tells him there's more than his back that they need to worry about, goes on to frame the overall situation in the entire gang, and then tells Dutch all the horrible things he's done. In a strange way, from my perspective, this feels almost parallel to the test Dutch himself failed with Bronte. When Bronte jokes about having Dutch kill Hector Fellows for him one day, Dutch pushed back. And in doing so, he accidentally tells Bronte everything he needs to know about him, that Dutch is a liar, yes, but one who hides his worst impulses behind a thin layer of reason, someone who still needs to believe his actions are justified, someone who won't be easily bought or manipulated, at least not directly. Bronte caught that immediately. So the question becomes, could Dutch have been doing something similar here with Arthur genuinely? By not giving Dutch the answer he wanted, by refusing to fully buy into the performance, the optimism, the great lie of the Vanderlyn gang's ideals, does Arthur here genuinely fail the test in Dutch's eyes? Or he just got annoyed, didn't want to hear anything Arthur had to say, didn't want to continue to face his failures within his own image and within saving his gang despite all the promises and hopes that he continues to hand day after day. And what he's currently hearing right now isn't disloyalty in action, but a refusal to affirm him. Could they really have been one of the same at this point? If belief is the real currency now, then doubt doesn't just like concern, it is the genuine root of betrayal. Dutch's final words here aren't any kind of instructions or any extra beneficial information on what he can expect when going out to clear out Beaver Hollow. They're a warning. He needs time, and he makes it clear he needs no traitors. This is where the third indicator shows itself. Arthur's delegated the task of clearing out Beaver Hollow. He's not brought along, not kept close, sent away to deal with danger due to his failure of Dutch testing his belief system. And so, language came first, irritation came second, and now delegation. The evolution of which is unmistakable. It's just hard to miss it, given everything else that happens in between these signals.
One score and one whole hell of a lot of noise.
We ain't so good at doing scores anymore, Dutch.
Are you feeling all right, Arthur?
The complexity of the Vanderlyn gang's collapse, and Dutch's shifting priorities as he struggles to keep his former caring facade intact, is one of those elements of Red Dead Redemption 2 that only feels to grow heavier the more time you sit with it. The more you look at certain aspects of the game and choose to either isolate certain instances or build these smaller arcs. And one of the ways this works out is you can technically argue Arthur betrays Dutch, but that argument only works depending on how you define betrayal in the first place. From Gorma through Beaver Hollow, Arthur becomes the spiritual carrier of what the gang originally stood for, what it valued, what it believed it was trying to protect, and in doing so, he became a mirror Dutch refused to look into, a reminder of ideals Dutch increasingly distanced himself from, often even dismissing Arthur not on principle but on circumstance. He's sick, he's weak, he's fading usefulness. And philosophically, Arthur's failing health mirrors the gang's own declining way of life. The ideals don't die all at once. They weaken, they struggle to breathe, they persist through one person whose energy and drive are visibly draining away day after day. And because of that, it becomes easier for Dutch to then justify why he had to change, why deviation wasn't betrayal, but another form of necessity. Arthur technically betrays Dutch by advocating for John's freedom, by pushing for Abigail and Jack to escape the cycle, by choosing a future that doesn't involve blind obedience. But Dutch also betrays Arthur and John and the rest of the gang by abandoning what the gang was meant to be in the first place, by transforming a family into an extension of himself, by confusing leadership with ownership, and by expecting loyalty not to share values but to his authority alone. And by expecting loyalty, not to shared values, but to his authority alone. That's the core of it, that's the heart of it, the soul of the entire collapse.